so you made it through these first few boring presentations. This is when I want you to wake up, okay? Get your notepad out, take notes. This is the money slide right here, okay? This is what you paid your money to come in here. Production of queen cells. This is where all the magic happens. It doesn't happen, I'm pulling a larva from a cell and putting it in a cup. Anybody can be trained to do that. This is where the beekeeping part of it comes in. This is where you really have to have things squared away. Again, you've seen the name Michael Palmer. You've heard it several times today. He is one of the best beekeepers in the country as far as I'm concerned. This is a frame of 48 queen cells. And I want you to notice something. Anyone, tell me what you see from this frame. Anybody?
They're huge.
They're huge. What are they like?
Swarm cells.
Like swarm cells. That's what we're targeting, guys. Each one of these is a monster cell. I don't see a bad cell on these frames. 48 cells on one frame. You gotta know what you're doing to make this, so don't get discouraged, all right? Don't expect to make 48 cells like that in your first year of queen production. We're not targeting 48 cells in this class, right? We're targeting 5 to 10 cells. But that's what you can do if you know what you're doing and have the right conditions.
Is that a normal size frame or is that a modified?
That's a deep size frame.
Not counting the run
That's
in the
what
middle.
this thing. So there's 3 of them, just like that. There's a missing bar here, of course.
So that takes a lot of resources to feed that.
So what does it take? It takes a
lot of bees.
lot of nurse bees. Not just any old bees. You want those 6-day-old nurse bees. And that's the magic of getting cells like that. There's another name, a very, very famous last name, Ladshaw. Anyone know that name? His father, Harry Ladshaw, was one of the pioneers in instrumental insemination. Joe Ladshaw, the son, he's carrying on his father's tradition. His son is getting into beekeeping as well. He produces a huge number of breeder queens, instrumentally inseminated queens. He is probably one of the largest breeder queen producers in the country. Reading statement here. My goal is quality because in all the years I have been raising queens, my records show that quality starts in the cell builder and pays dividends for the rest of the queen's life. So, if Joe's saying that, I want you all to perk your ears up, listen to what he's saying there. And I also mentioned that David Tarpey has a laboratory at NC State, and what David will do, for the right price, you can send them samples of your queens. Probably not going to be doing that as a backyard beekeeper, but he will evaluate your queens. He will evaluate them not only for these 3 categories, your weight, thorax, and head width. He will basically dissect them. He'll count the size of the ovaries. He'll measure the spermatheca. He'll give you a grade. Joe, based on only 3 criteria, he got an A+. You notice his weight was even low. He said in the article that his samples were taken during a dearth, so his weight was low for that reason alone. But the real measure of goodness is not necessarily the weight, it's that thorax size. He was in the 97th percentile on the thorax size. That means the development of his queens were fantastic. A+ from David Tarpey's lab for Joe Ladshaw's queens. So this is obviously someone who knows how to make quality queens. And this is what the statement was. The magic starts in the cell building. Okay? So there's only 3 basic steps. gonna be simple, right? So, although many techniques exist, most rely on the following three basic concepts. Producing and providing larvae of the appropriate age. So this is where your breeder queen comes into play, and getting the larva out into a cell cup. That's typically done by most serious queen producers with grafting. Inducing the bees to build queen cells. This is typically referred to as a cell builder. This is the most important aspect of anything. Providing an environment for the queens pre and post mating. Okay, and that's mating. So this basically encompasses the rest of the day today. So it should be simple, but it's got some issues on various things. Let's briefly talk about some nomenclature. There's different language and different aspects of beekeeping. I don't know if you've ever heard these terms before. There's a cell starter, cell finisher, and a combination cell starter finisher. So the cell starter, its sole purpose is just to get a queen cell started. So you've already provided the bees with the appropriate age larva, and they're going to start building the cell starter. So typically, almost always a separate queenless colony whose sole objective is to start queen cells. Start queen cells means they're only given 24 hours to start that cell. And then they're broken down, the cell starter colony is broken down after 24 hours. So it's a temporary thing whose sole mission is just to get a queen cell started. Typically given more cells than they could adequately finish. They'll generally give a small cell starter, I'm talking a 5-frame nuke with just bees, 45 to 60 queen cells to start. It has to be used in conjunction with what's called a cell finisher. I'll talk about that in the next block here. The cell starter is a closed-in box. The bees can't come or go. It's held for 24 hours, and its sole mission is to start those cells and then get broken down. Once you get those cells started, you need this thing called a cell finisher to take the cells through maturity. The separate colony used in conjunction with the cell starter, whose purpose is to take the started cells to fully capped queen cells. Cell finishers can be either queenless or queen-right. This is a more advanced thing. Typically, the queen-right part is more advanced and typically a later season thing. A queen-right cell starter, basically the cells are put some distance above the queen. Queen flutter is going to be important, and they are finished using a supersedure impulse. So remember we talked about supersedure and swarming, and we're kind of leveraging the swarming aspect. This technique more leverages the supersedure impulse into the queen-right colony.
Sean, so when you say a distance from the queen, like the queen's in the bottom brood box and you put a queen excluder there and then have those cells above?
Yeah, you can even have like a medium honey super between the queen excluder and the cells that you're trying to finish. So you basically want the queen's pheromones to be blocked, or they're not going to be finishing those things as well. Now, what I said in the previous slide, you can just kind of squirrel that away in your mind and say, okay, there's these two things and they have different purposes. Everything we're going to be talking about today, and what I urge you to try, is to combine the starter finisher. I've used this technique exclusively. Everything I do is a starter finisher, the combined two pieces. So as the name suggests, it combines the two functions of cell starting and cell finishing into a single unit, single colony. I'm not taking a bunch of bees, shaking them into an empty box, putting it in my garage for 24 hours just to get the cell started. I'm not doing that at all. The benefits of this With minimal resources needed to build quality cells. Remember, I'm trying to target backyard beekeepers here, so I don't want you to have 50 colonies to make queens. I want you to be able to do that with a handful of colonies, 2, 3, or more. It's a one-time setup with minimal ongoing resources. So you can set up this starter finisher one time in the season, and you can just keep augmenting into that colony and build cells through the entire season you want to. And there's not a lot of maintenance once you get it going. The first technique I talk about, I'm going to talk about it's part 1 and part 2. The part 1, which is before lunch, it's going to be very little lifting. The part 2 after lunch is going to have a little more lifting to it, but not something terrible. This is well suited for backyard beekeepers. It can be set up quickly and still provides consistent results. We want good cells. We want to be able to do that somewhat consistently. We don't want to, just set up a cell builder and make one set of queen cells, and the next time we use it, it doesn't make anything. So we want some consistent technique that provides some level of consistency. And we also, of course, the focus of this class is quality queens. And you can certainly make them using this combined method. So this is best suited for a hobbyist who doesn't have the need to make a lot of cells at one time. So I'm going to be targeting like 5 to 10 cells. I don't want you to graft 30 cells and put them in a cell builder. I want you to graft 5 to 10. First time you might get 3 that take. The next time, well, Christine came out to my house and she wanted to learn grafting, so we grafted it, and she got 9 at first take. So that was, she's a natural, but she comes in with
Lab background.
lots of lab background experience. That doesn't mean that you guys can't do it too. So definitely you have to try this. So here it is, the recipe, the combined starter finisher. What you need, preferred equipment, is a 5-frame nuke. This guy right here. Everyone should have ample supply of these in their bee yard. If you're making queens or doing anything, you have to have some nukes around, okay? So what you want to do is you want to collect 5 frames. 2 of them are going to be capped emerging brood. So CB, capped brood. You have 2. You're going to go out to any colony. Doesn't have to be the same colony. You're going to grab 2 frames of capped emerging brood. What's the difference between capped brood and capped emerging brood? Anybody know?
Captivity is almost, we're about starting to come out.
Yeah, so capped emerging brood, how you differentiate that between just plain old capped brood is you're going to look at the frame and you're going to see actively bees emerging. Well, if you don't see that, you're going to see a much darker cappings. So as the bees are tracking over those cappings, they get darker and darker. So when they're first capped, they're kind of light. You're kind of looking for that burnt toast kind of look. That real dark capped brood. Those are the frames we're trying to grab. You want 2 of those. You want 2 honey and pollen. Don't take just honey frames. Okay, so you want some pollen and honey mix. The bees need pollen to make queen cells. You want 1 frame of open brood from your breeder queen. So you've selected which colony you want to propagate. You go into that breeder colony and you grab a frame that has eggs. That frame is going to be, it's the open brood frame, OB. That's why nomenclature there. The frame that's OB, open brood, you're going to be looking at that. And what you want to see are lots of eggs. The queen will probably be on that frame. She's probably laying as you're watching it. So you're going to see eggs, and on the peripheral of the eggs, you're going to see just hatched eggs. That's the frame you want, okay? So it has to have lots of eggs. And on the honey frames, unsealed honey is preferred, okay? Don't give them a big solid frame of honey that's capped over. If you have one, typically the frame with pollen on it is not fully capped yet. Those are the 2 honey pollen frames you want. Uncapped frames are the best. You want the nurse bees not to go into a lot of effort to get the resources, and you want them spending their time uncapping frames or cells. You want to have them spending their time getting the resources they need to get right back on the larva. Okay? Optionally, you can have a half-width queen excluder on the bottom board. This box is a one-piece box, so it doesn't have the bottom is screwed on, but I do have a little device that fits on the front. It's a queen excluder. It's just basically a queen excluder with a grid that fits over the entrance. Why would I want that?
To keep.
Keep rogue virgin queens from going in there.
Exactly. So you don't want a queen in your cell builder. So you can keep them out by having a queen excluder on it. It's not the end of the world. It's the end of those cells. But you can
Why
prevent
would a
them.
virgin queen want to go into that box?
Huh?
Why would a virgin queen want to go in that?
They get disoriented. They have like the smell of those bees. It happens quite frequently, actually.
Can a virgin get through with?
Not a good virgin. Remember, we're making quality queens. It has a big thorax. You can't get through that queen excluder. Now, here's an important step, guys. In addition to the stuff, the 5 frames you got, you want at least 3, 4 more frames. You're going through colonies now. You're going through all your yard, all your colony. You want at least 3 to 4 frames containing nurse bees. What do nurse bees look like? Fuzzy little bees. Look, they just popped out of the cell. They're all fuzzy, tiny. They're going to be smaller. They're not the big old shiny bees, hairless bees. They're the fuzzy ones. You want 3 to 4 frames of those, and you shake those 3 to 4 frames. If you can spare more, do it. Shake them right into the box, and return the frames back to where they came from. So more nurse bees is better. So this is an important step, okay? So right now we have 5 frames, plus we have some frames we've just harvested bees. So we have the resources and the bees here. And this is in a 5-frame box. So we want the high density of nurse bees. We're achieving that by grabbing 4 frames of nurse bees. We have the capped brood that's emerging. Those are fresh new bees that are going to be helping to build cells. This is a huge, important step right here. Don't shake in a queen. So we'll talk more about that. But the orientation inside the box is going to be like this. So this is the outer wall of the box. This is the other outer wall of the box. Cat brood, cat brood. It's going to be symmetric. Honey pollen, honey pollen. The center frame here, this is the one that came from your breeder queen. This is the one that you're going to use to graft from, okay? That OB, open brood, has to have a lot of eggs. That's super important, okay? Now this is a free-flying colony, not like that cell starter thing we talked about that was a closed box. This is free-flying. If you have the option to move it to a new yard, that's cool, that's good, because you're going to lose a few bees out of it. Now, the worker bees aren't great honey, royal jelly producers anyway, but they can manage the colony. They can help manage the colony, defend it, and keep the colony warm. But, so if you backyard beekeepers generally don't have access to out yards, so it's fine, keep it in the same yard. I generally just keep mine, all my cell builders, are either derived from outside yards and brought into the house, or I make them right in the yard, same yard. So it works either way.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
So, in this case, you do not shut the nuke.
The nuke is not closed in at all, never. I mean, even when you don't close it up for a night, just so they kind of forget where they live, no. You just make it, you shake in the bees, and take what you get.
Because the starter one, you have to shut it down for 24 hours, right? And I guess when you shut it down, you have to give it some water
Yes.
to...
Yeah, I didn't really talk about the cell starter exclusively because we're really not going to be going into detail, but the cell starter, yes, you shake in the bees, there's no brood in that colony, and in the bottom of the box there's generally a little sponge in a tray where the bees can get water, and you're going to be feeding those too, okay?
Do we use a queen excluder when we shake the bees? The nurse bees, so as to avoid...
You can, ideally that would be what you'd want to do, but this is a minimal resource kind of thing right here, so you can just shake bees in and hope for the best. If you go through the colony, your donor colony, what I typically do is I go through that donor colony, I find the queen, I have a nuke box with me, she goes in a nuke box, I close up that nuke box, and she just stays there. Yes, Ruth?
What I like to do is there's a queen clip in each one of your kits. I like to find the queen of the colony I'm shaking. I just put her in the clip, so I know where she's at. I don't have another box with me. And that way I can shake them in and I know what's good. It's also another reason to mark your queens because you can find her more easily.
Yep. Marked queens are very beneficial in the queen rearing process because you can find that queen quickly. There's certain times in beekeeping you need to find the queen. This is one of them. I'm going to talk about that later. There's a certain thing, it's called a shaker box, that prevents queens from getting into your cell builder, but I'll talk about that later. So, anyone have any questions about the setup? This is the secret sauce here.
Can nurse bees fly?
Nurse bees generally don't fly. Yeah, they certainly haven't gone out and oriented yet. They're 3 to 6 days, 10 days old. So they're still solitary. They're in their houses here. They don't go out.
Just to make it easy, do you normally do this during the time of day when most reporters are out, so you're not,
I do it at any time. You know, I don't really target a specific time to set this up. It's not just a recipe that you just do and then you just plow through. You assess. You know, if you've lost a lot of force out of that thing, you're going to have to go back and grab some more nurse bees. So you have to evaluate how your setup played out. If you've lost the entire population out of this thing, you've obviously done something wrong.
And you can take, like if you have 2 separate yards, you can take nurse bees from
Oh, absolutely.
all the yards?
Yeah. I'm taking nurse bees from every colony, all the colonies I want. I don't grab them all from one colony. It does require finding more queens, right? So that's a labor-intensive time sink right there.
Yeah.
But as Ruth said, having the queens marked facilitates getting in there, finding her either with a clip, or I bring in what's called kind of a quiet box that will nuke, and nuke her, just leave her there, do my business, and go on and grab more.
Look for a queen.
3 to 4 is a minimum. 3 to 4 is a minimum. I like to shake in more bees. More bees, more opportunities. You have to make good queens. Okay. Step 2. Place a feeder on, provide a continuous flow of 1-to-1 sugar syrup. Small and continuous pollen patties are helpful too. If there's not a lot of active pollen coming in, you're going to want to put a pollen patty on. Pollen patties in Hampton Roads is a double-edged sword. So too much pollen patty for the density of the bees could potentially be a small hive beetle issue. So I generally have small pollen patties about that big, about 3/8 of an inch thick, this little pollen biscuits basically.
Who do you like to use for your pollen patties? What company or brand?
Man Lake, if I buy it, that's where I generally buy it, Man Lake Bee Pro. It works pretty well. I've also collect a lot of pollen, and so I use the pollen that I collect. I make that into, basically you can take an empty frame and just pour pollen and just kind of rub it into the cells. I spray that with a little sugar water, kind of locks it in the frame. That's what I do. But I've used just standard pollen patty mix.
So you have a pollen trap?
I have lots of pollen traps, yes. So, feed it with sugar syrup. Pollen patties are helpful. If there's a huge pollen flow on, you might be able to get away with it. If that honey, if those 2 frames of honey and pollen had a lot of pollen in it, you're probably okay without having to go to the trouble of putting pollen patties on. But if you're trying to rear queens in non-ideal conditions, you may have to do this. So remember, we had that one frame with the eggs and open brood and eggs. You leave that in the center frame position until grafting day. Typically no less than 24 hours. So you set this thing up, it's ready to go. The following day, or even 2 days later, you go back, and this is the frame you're going to be grafting from, that center frame. Now, it's important, on grafting day, either 1 or 2 days after you set this thing up, to carefully inspect all the frames. Because just because a frame was marked as honey and pollen, the HP frames, doesn't mean that there were not some rogue eggs somewhere. Sometimes you're in the corner, it'll be mostly honey and pollen, but there could be some spare space around. Sometimes queens will lay in it. They're desperate for space. And this thing, this cell builder you just created, in 1 day will start making queen cells. They know they're queenless. So on grafting day, you have to carefully inspect all the frames for queen cells. Of course, you're expecting to see queen cells on this open brood frame. Yes?
Could you avoid that by using honey and pollen that has been stored in a freezer?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. But you're still going to have the capped brood frames, right? So there's no option there. So you're going to have to still inspect those. So remove any queen cells on these outer 2 frames. Technically, all 4 frames have to be inspected for queen cells. The 2 outer on both sides, inspected for queen cells. Remove any. Now on the center frame, gently shake or brush all bees. I prefer brush. I'm not a big fan of bee brushes, but this is when they're valuable. You take the bees on this frame, because what bees are right there now? Those are your nurse bees. And those are the larvae you're going to graft with. So I don't like to really give this a big shake. I like to be very gentle with this frame. So I'll take my bee brush and just flick them into the box. So I'm going to remove all the bees from both sides of this frame. Okay? And the bees go back into that box. This happens day 1 after it's set up or day 2. Not super critical. Why do I give you some time there? Anyone know? I don't say you have to do it on a certain period of time. After setup, initial setup. Anybody know?
Well, you're gonna pick your cell, right?
Yeah. So I said that this thing has to have eggs in it. Those eggs can be freshly laid, and they won't be hatched by the 2nd day. The 1st day or 2nd day may not hatch till the 3rd day. But I'm hoping that there's going to be enough variety on that cell that there's good grafting material, either the 1st day or the 2nd day. Yes, Ruth?
Plus it also gives the bees time to feed them the royal jelly, so it's a whole lot easier to pick them up.
That's right, and you must have read my slides. Okay, so
Are you saying you don't like brushes in general?
I generally don't use a brush unless I'm doing this kind of operation. I never use a brush to remove bees off honey super. That just seems to aggravate them.
What do you usually do?
I have a bee blower, I blow them out. So, now we inspect this frame. This is the magic center frame. This is what we really want to evaluate. You should see queen cells started on this frame. So So we showed you earlier what a queen cell looks like. You should see the beginning seeds of queen cells. If you don't see queen cells started, that's a big problem. There's something wrong. Even one day after it, they're going to start a queen cell. So the center frame is kind of the canary in the coal mine. It serves 5 separate functions. It confirms that the cell builder is queenless. So 1 or 2 days later, you're going to look, oh yeah, queen cell started. Like, check. There's no queen in this box, right? If there's a queen in the box, they're not going to be making queen cells. Not 100% chance of very good. It also ensures that the nurse bees are in feeding mode. You've done the right things. You've got the right number of nurse bees in there. You have the sugar syrup on there. You have the palm patty. They're in queen cell production mode. So that's important too. And here's what Ruth just mentioned. It provides ample royal jelly. So that frame, they're making as many queen cells as they think they can from the material you gave them. So the larvae are going to be floating in copious amounts of royal jelly. If you just go out into some other colony, and if the flow conditions are not great, there's going to be a dry situation. There'll be royal jelly on each larva, but they're not going to be floating. A good cell starter like this, cell builder like this, even the day-old larva is going to be floating in lots of jelly. Okay? So that's critical. It really makes the grafting much, much easier. Okay? It allows you to judge the quality of the cells being started. Are they loading these cells with jelly? If not, go back to the previous day and repeat. What does that mean? That means go back and find some more nurse bees and load this thing up with more nurse bees. And of course, this is the primary thing. This middle frame provides the larva for grafting. There's lots of functions of this thing. This kind of gives you the Reader's Digest version of that cell builder. Allows you to judge how this thing is performing. Was it set up properly? Are they doing the things that you expect them to do? So, this is when you graft your 12-hour-old larva into cell cups. Day 1 or day 2, you choose.
So we destroyed all the queen cells we saw before that, right?
Well, you've destroyed the queen cells on the 4 other frames. Not this center frame. You haven't done anything with this thing
But
yet,
it
other than
will
remove
have-
the bees.
It would have some queen cells in there.
This will